Hi everyone. It's Worst Horse Sunday. Maybe we should have that more often. You know, this is one of those old Buddha things, but there's a kind of old Buddhist things that the Zen people use, but often to make fun of, and and it was about somehow it was some sort of categorization of Zen students, like the fine horse runs even at the shadow of the whip. The decent horse runs when the whip has nearly hit them, and so on, and down to you can whip the worst horse. You can just whip, and it just does what it wants. and um, and obviously this is a scale about striving and being a better student and all that sort of thing. But in Zen, we don't always see things that way. So Shunryu Suzuki, who's a very modest, interesting person in that way, he said he always thought it was good to be the worst horse. And I remember a story about him, which I'm sure you've heard. I don't know if you've heard. Anyway, regardless, I'll tell. When a temple in New York, actually, the big Japanese temple was opening in New York State, and all sorts of important people were invited. Zen people, roshis were invited in, things like that. And this is just before I came to the United States, so I only know accounts of this. But the day before this, so people at the temple were just trying to clean up furiously. And the day before, this little Japanese guy arrives and sees what's going on, picks up a broom and starts helping. So people give him other tasks to help, a hammer and things like that. And he doesn't talk much, and he just really works all day. Then the next day of the ceremony, it turns out he's got all his robes and he's Suzuki Shunryu. And I thought that was a great story about him. He just turned up and helped out, and did what needed to be done. And it seemed a very good Zen sort of story. And another friend of mine who sat with him said people in Zen were always looking for rules so they could keep them and do it right, and maybe police others who weren't doing it right and things like that. So they asked him for rules one day, and he thought a bit, and then he said, "See that broom in the corner that's got its bristles down? You should store it with its bristles up, because then the bristles won't get bent and it'll be a good broom. That's a rule. Keep that one." so anyway, it's Suzuki. The worst horse. What is it to be the worst horse? Maybe it means to be in the Tao. Very Taoist idea, the worst horse. So actually, I just spoke to Jordan, whose brother's been sick, and he was saying how. Anyway, but Jordan, do you want to say anything about that? I just want to. It's a very worst horsey thing. Somebody gets really sick, and you get really close to them. So yeah.
Yeah, it's like I've had a worst horse year. It feels like my brother got a cancer diagnosis earlier last year, um, and it was a little touch and go there for a while. He had an 18-month-old daughter at the time, and it just seemed like, you gotta be kidding me. But I was telling John that he's through the worst of it now. His treatment seems to have been effective, and one of the outcomes of it is that him and I are a lot closer now. About a month, I think it was about a month after he got his diagnosis, he sent me a text message and ended it with "I love you," which was like, that had never happened before. But I was like, holy shit, this must be really serious. So yeah, worst horse moments.
Yeah, yeah. Holy shit, this must be serious. That's it. There's some great stuff. This is, I have two Hungarian worst horse moments, I think, here. This is, a friend of mine brought me a book yesterday which had a poem. It's an old favorite of mine I'd forgotten about. And this is Miroslav Holub, Brief Reflection on Maps. Albert Zent Georgi, who knew a thing or two about maps by which life moves somewhere or other, used to tell this story from the war through which history moved somewhere or other. From a small Hungarian unit in the Alps, a young lieutenant sent out a scouting party into the icy wastes. At once it began to snow. It snowed for 2 days, and the party did not return. The lieutenant was in distress. He had sent his men to their deaths. On the 3rd day, however, the scouting party was back. Where had they been? How did they manage to find their way? Yes, the man explained, we certainly thought we were lost and awaited our end, when suddenly one of our lot found a map in his pocket. We felt reassured. We made a bivouac, waited for the snow to stop, and then with the map found the right direction, and here we are. The lieutenant asked to see that remarkable map in order to study it. It wasn't a map of the Alps, but of the Pyrenees. So that's what our maps are good for. And I think Judy Herzl's on here somewhere, who has another Hungarian story. Here she is. Judy sent me a worst horse story about her dad, actually. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a Yugoslavian worst horse story. Yeah. At the start of World War II, he was conscripted into the Royal Yugoslavian Army, and since he was Jewish and he looked like an intellectual with his wire-rimmed glasses, they gave him the worst horse. And he said that when there was a battle, all the big shot generals would get there first in their motor cars and die, and him with his worst horse would get there after everything was over. So anyway, that's my worst horse story, and I was just very intrigued at the topic. So I'm curious and interested in everything else you share.
Thanks, Judy. It's nice to Judy and I know each other from Santa Fe, I think, and it's where she is a book agent, I believe. And anyway, it's nice to think of your father surviving. It's a nice thing. How we come through all those worst horse moments. All our ancestors have done that. Yeah. Here's somebody else who. Thank you, Judy. And I suppose it's a thing of spiritual work that, my first book was really written about the light inside the dark, that you have to go into the dark first. You don't have to, but whether you have to or not, you do. And so in the spiritual world, there's often a feeling of wanting to ascend, and there's so many medieval and Renaissance paintings of everybody ascending into light. And but we actually need to, in a way, to have imperfection and loss makes us human, like Jordan's story, and that way we're linked to the treasures of the deep, and the sorrow can actually be a humanizing force for us. So it's a nice thing. Jesse Carden looks like he's half asleep, having stayed up with his kid last night or something. Do you have anything to say about, that whole worst horse thing?
Yeah,
That was part of your dharma.
Yeah, I think the last couple of months has just been worst horse territory, and one way or another. I was sitting just thinking, looking at all the different points in my life right now that are worst horse, and I went and played pickleball yesterday, and which is something that I do a lot now, and I've been like, I'm always pushing my body too far, not paying any attention to it, saying you need to slow down and you need to, and so I have to get like whipped to the bone before I'll even do something as simple as stretching before I play or something. I have to get an injury to force me to stretch before I play. And so I felt like I was doing really well. I was doing physical therapy exercises from two separate injuries in the past, from my low back and my upper back. I was like, this is really good. I'm really straight. And then I went yesterday and went for a low shot, and my right knee popped. And now I'm like limping around. You gotta be kidding me. I'm like, George, oh, Jesus Christ. And but I don't know. I'm learning one thing that I'm noticing is that, oh, that's just the way I am about some things. And so that's okay. Okay. So I need to get whipped to the bones. And with other things, I'm not like that. And then there's the thing about I can start to trust what the universe is doing with me when it pops my knee. It's, it's trying to help me, or at least I don't think my initial response is, oh my God, I can't believe this. This is so unfair or something. But I don't know, the more and more I think it's trying to help in some way. It's trying to support me in some way. And clearly I'm not paying attention. I'm not paying enough attention. So I'm just try to put the bristles up a little more often might be helpful.
Maybe not. Maybe you just have to sweep with that bent broom.
It'll have to do.
I've been in temples that had that bent broom. I want to read something of Neruda's here, if I can find it. I think I can find it. And it's to sadness, this is somewhat in support of what Jordan said, I think. But I need sadness, I need your black wing, so much sun, so much honey in the topaz, each ray smiles in the meadow, and everything is round light on all sides of me. Everything is an electric bee in the heights, and so give me your black wing, sister sadness. I need the sapphire to be extinguished sometimes in the oblique mesh of the rain to fall, the weeping of the earth. I want that shattered beam in the estuary, the vast house in darkness, and my mother searching for paraffin and filling the lamp until it gave not light, but a sigh. The night wasn't born, the day was sliding towards its provincial graveyard, and between the bread and the shadow, I remember myself in the window, looking out at what didn't exist, what wasn't happening, and a black wing of water that came over that heart, which there perhaps I forgot forever in the window. Now I miss the black light. Give me your slow blood, cold rain. Give me your astonished flight. Give me back the key of the door that was shut, destroyed. For a moment, for a short lifetime, take the light from me and let me feel myself lost and miserable, trembling among the threads of twilight, receiving into my soul the trembling of the hands of the rain. So quite some time ago when I was teaching physicians a lot, I discovered that poem had a magical effect on them because everybody was teaching them how to divide life into sections and achieve and move from section 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. And they'd say, could you read that one again? So it was like, and I remember that whole thing, what is Zen? Have your life. Have your life. You're not living the wrong life. Yeah. I had a friend who later became a Zen teacher who noticed that there are a lot of little, in a city in Australia, there are little Suzuki vans. And he noticed their horns were, he was a musician, and he noticed their horns were tuned to different notes. And so he went and put under the windshield wipers, he went and put an announcement of a musical event for Suzuki vans, and they had to meet at a certain time in the town square, things like that. And so actually about 20 vans came, and he listened to all the notes, and then he stood there with the conductor and got them to hit the horn when he pointed at them. and he called it fanfare for the common van, which is kind of funny. But it was great. So what you can do with the worst horse categories and possibilities. I think to praise this life, and music praise it, to praise this life is something we can do with the sorrow and the rage and everything that's engendered in us, and the shame and all those things. Praise it. Worst horse, something about the difficulties of life temper us and initiate us. And kicking and screaming sometimes, but nonetheless. And I feel like my heart expands. My heart has expanded in such, I'm still whatever I am. But there's a certain way in which life then, I let life come into me more, and people and so on. I suppose love is one of the names for that. But it's also true to somehow not fight off the sorrows and difficulties. And it's sort of a nice thing to realize we don't have to do that. And then, because if we're fighting off the difficulties, we're fighting off each other. So just to say, I'm just sort of feeling that, to take things in and like to look at your faces and take you in rather than already knowing who you are and how I'm connected to you and things like that. It's a beautiful thing, tender thing. So, Alison, do you have anything you would like to say?
Well, I was very struck by the line in the Neruda poem where he says, "The door that was shut." And I'm thinking about that with the worst horse, where in a way it's what I imagine would be not acceptable or not included, or what would make me personally a failure, and somehow lose my place or lose my place in the world. But I like that image of the door that was shut, and it made me think of a cascade of memories. And the first one was, this sort of took me down through time. And the first one was my first session that I ever went to. And I remember that I was just incredibly moved by the quality of silence. The silence seemed to be almost like some sort of thick substance that the air had suddenly become, the silence was a thing, a living thing. And I remember looking across me, and there was John Joseph, who was at the time still wearing Japanese robes. And he had a way of sitting so perfectly still that it was unnerving to me. And I thought for sure I was the worst horse, because in that silence, the very first thing that came into my being was the very thing that in my own mind would make me a failure and was absolutely not allowed in a Zendo, which was crying. No one ever said that to me personally, that you're not allowed to cry in a Zendo. But somehow I had made this rule in my mind that it was not acceptable. And then that sorrow was the door that was shut. And then, and then I remembered sitting here in meditation that happened to me also in yoga during Shavasana. When before I came to meditation, I had a long yoga practice, long many years yoga practice, and I just hated Shavasana. Everyone always was looking forward to it, but I just loathed and detested it because it was a place where the door was opening on its own, and I really didn't like that. Where I would start to cry in Shavasana, and it just felt so dangerous, and I felt so exposed. And that was the thing about being the worst horse, that when the door is not shut, when I'm letting myself, or the world is just allowing somehow, all right, here I am. I'm doing the thing that is not allowed and will make me, um, I'll lose my place. But it's actually really, it was just a defense against letting people close to me and letting people see me and joining the world. It's like the door, that was the opening, that was the way through. And then I remembered a memory of when I was a child, and I have 8 brothers and sisters. And so there were always the 4 youngest, the 4 were all girls. So the 4 girls had one room. And the thing you never had was a door you could shut. You were always with other people. There was no such thing as solitude in my family, especially if you were one of the youngest girls. And so I remember my mother at some point went back to school, and she would go to UCLA and be gone in the evenings sometimes. And I remember missing her so terribly at night that I would cry, but I wouldn't want any of my sisters to know that I was crying. And that seemed, I don't know why, it just seemed you weren't allowed to cry or be sad. So I would taught myself to cry silently under my blankets and into my pillow so no one would know that I was sad. And that's that closing of the door of connection, really, um, which the worst horse just can't stop itself from doing, weeping. So that's me as the worst horse, someone who cries.
Very good. Tess Beasley.
I like that word that Allison just used, dangerous. I noticed, I don't know, I was feeling in the meditation how the accumulation of worst horse moments in my life have gradually just made me less afraid of almost anything that might come. And I notice it sometimes, even when I'll talk to people in Dokusan, that, like some of the koans say, but people will laugh at me, or I'll lose my life, or I'll fail, and there's a place in which, having been the worst horse through love, through efforts, through all these things, there's a place down inside to touch into that just says, so what? So any of those things will happen, and there's still, because you've become intimate with whatever place that might be, with rejection, with failure, with being weak or slow, with being needy, with being like whatever you can possibly imagine, because you've become intimate with it, doesn't matter. It's all right. And you know that, I don't know, you become to trust something. And I liked what Allison said as well, that it was in that Neruda poem too, where he said something about lostness and misery, that there was some way, and that there is a kind of when I'm in that place myself, there is a kind of different kind of gratitude for any small kindness of the world, for the way the sun shines, or the way someone might think of me or do something for me, or there's a kind of coming down in being the worst horse, that I'm no longer sure that achieving something, or I don't know, passing my koan really fast, or being, whatever it is, that's better. That just being here and feeling things fully and being in deep connection with things is nice, even if there's no glory to it. So, no, I think that's all I've got today. Thanks.
And the big thing I'm feeling is just everybody's saying such great things. You don't need anything else. And then I notice, it's really hard for me thinking of things to say. And that's a big part of my feeling like a worst horse. I'm going to have a story. I'm going to have something to say. And thinking about the worst horse, I was also just thinking about how in that story where it talks about the best horse runs at like the shadow of the whip. I thought how easy it is to run at the shadow of the worst horse, instead of like, wait, what is this worst horse? What is this? It's like, it's just so scary to be the worst horse sometimes. And the first poem that you read, John, the one about the people in the Pyrenees with the wrong map, is great. I've always really enjoyed that myself. I was thinking about that one, and the whole, like, how much we want to have a map that we feel like we know what we're doing. And then in some ways the poem is like, oh, you're going to end up in a good place, if you have the wrong map, sort of thing. And I'm like, huh, and where you're going to, it's like, that's a symbol for where you're going to end up is here. Whatever map you're using, that's where we're going to end up. Like back at base camp is here. And so like the map, that's the thing, the idea of the map makes us think like we know where we're going and we want to be there and we know what it feels like and all of that. And you're going to end up here, whatever map you use. So don't worry too much about it.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm going to call on someone who I know doesn't like to speak much, but so you can say no. But Tom McConnell, do you want to say anything?
Well, you caught me off guard.
That was the idea, yes.
Maps. I live my whole life by maps. And that's what I want right now. Maps. And I suppose there's a map, but it's not something that was laid out in front of me. And just lately, I've been finding that my only map is really this moment. And I keep coming back to that. It's like if I go there, then all I have to do is say no to everything else. I don't know if this makes any sense to you, but anyway, that's all I have to say about it, except that maps have been my life.
I like the thing about this moment, yeah, and everything spreads out from there and everything else is not it. So thank you, Tom. Thanks for speaking. Okay. I noticed I was up at a friend's place in Mendocino and looking at the water, and there were 3 vultures on a fence post, and I noticed that I tend to like to, in a small sort of way, I tend to prefer to write poems about, hawks or bluebirds or something, but this one is about vultures. Why so doleful, vultures? Dry your wings, philosophize. No doubt something will die soon. Vulture life, And, Stafford is a good worst horse person. William Stafford. He he wrote. I don't know why he did it this way, but he wrote and wrote and wrote, and he wrote every day. And people would come. Eventually, people get you to come to they get you to hold poetry workshops, if only because you want to make a living, and things like that. And so he would hold poetry workshops, and he'd tell people, write a poem every day, and people would say, my God, I couldn't possibly write a poem every day. And he'd say, lower your standards. So don't go in the direction of the best horse, go in the direction of the worst horse. Like that's kind of nice. Important thing. Yeah. And sometime this is Stafford, ask me when the river is ice, sometime when the river is ice, ask me mistakes I have made. Ask me whether what I have done is my life. Others have come in their slow way into my thought, and some have tried to help or to hurt. Ask me what difference their strongest love or hate has made. I will listen to what you say. You and I can turn and look at the silent river and wait. We know the current is there, hidden, and there are comings and goings from miles away that hold the stillness exactly before us. What the river says, that is what I say. Amanda Boughton, do you want to say anything? It actually looks like somebody just jumped on her out of a closet,
Sure. I just like the worst horse poem, and it makes me think about comparison. And I liked what Michelle was saying about the like running from the shadow of the worst horse. I think about the the thing that I am afraid of being, and just how sitting with being the worst horse kind of just lets me be the thing that I'm afraid that I am. Um, and just thinking about how much it's just so chronic that, like, always comparing myself to something in my imagination that I think I ought to be, and how constricting that is and how invisible it is. But, like, man, I've had that realization so many times, and every time I have it, it feels new. And it keeps coming back, just these kind of invisible shackles. And maybe that's being the worst horse too, and I can just let myself be in prison for a while and feel what it's like. I guess that's kind of it.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Lonnie Rankin, do you have anything to say?
Oh, wow. Yeah. I love this, John. It's, when my husband died unexpectedly after a horrible illness, a friend compared the grief that I was having to riding a wild horse. And I thought it was so perfect, that description. And I thought, okay, I'll just ride it. I won't have any expectations. It's just going to be wild. But I'm realizing that I still thought I had reins and that I would somehow regain the use of them at some point. But illness is great at teaching you something different. And I'm realizing that I've been ill on and off lately. And just a few days ago, I was thinking, this is so damn inconvenient. It's not going the way I want it to go. I have all these plans. And anyway, I've been flogging that horse big time. So it's been interesting because I keep going back and forth during this time today between thinking I'm the horse or I'm either rider, and realizing kind of all one and the same. I'm either the floggee or the flogger. And I really don't have, I just have to keep learning over and over again that there aren't any reins and that I have to just let it go.
It's like any solution we come to is like, oh, well,
Not working.
I'll grasp harder at the reins. I'll let go of the reins. And really, I think Stafford's thing about the river is carrying us is about the best I can come up with. So, thanks, Lonnie. Leon, do you want to say anything?
Wow. I do. The worst horse is, I really relate to it, not at the moment, but like a year ago, I was riding the worst horse in a fit of depression. And I just thought, how am I going to ride this horse through this? How is this going to end? And it just kept going and going and going. And then eventually the horse stopped and I got off and got on another horse and came back up into the light of, what everyone is talking about today, of being able to just be here through all our difficulties, each one of us, and whether it be Lonnie or, Jordan relating to his brother, which I have that particular problem, and my worst horse. And it's just such a blessing, I would say, to be here and to have this opportunity to be with all of you. And I give great thanks for that.
Very well. Hanging out with the worst horses is good. Let's all hang out together. So, what is the worst horse? The best horse, the worst horse. There's no other moment to have. There's no other life to have. So we can trust our lives, whether we think they're worst or best horse lives. They're ours, and we have no other life and no other moment to have. It's a good thing.